Hi guys, my name is Condron. I am the founder of a protocol called Lumerin. A little bit about myself. In 2012, my buddy Kyle came to me and told me about this cool thing called Bitcoin. I was incredibly skeptical about it at first. I thought we were brute forcing SHA-256 for the Chinese government or something. So I did a lot of research. I started reading more about it in the Bitcoin talk forums, started finding all the information I could about Bitcoin, which was actually pretty scarce at the time. But my buddy told me about this one other thing called mining, and he said, look, we're processing the transactions ourselves. He showed me how it worked, and he said, you know, we could build these GPU rigs and we can make all this money. And he said, but it's not just Bitcoin. Like, there's another one out called Litecoin. He's like, I mined 5,000 Litecoin yesterday. I was like, great, how much is it worth? He's like, about 3 cents. I was like, okay, cool. I don't know what we're gonna do with 3 cents, but okay, cool, we have this thing called Litecoin now. So we started building GPU rigs, and we started mining these different cryptocurrencies as we started finding them, and we started realizing that some of the cryptocurrencies were worth more at certain times of the week or the day than others. So we started doing what's called profitability switching. We had switched between different networks depending on network difficulty and exchange price. That turned into a site called Coin Wars in early 2013. So we started publishing all of our formulas, started publishing all the data. That turned into launching about 80 different mining pools in 2013, 14, and 15. In 2013, there was a point where I was really getting into it, and oh, louder? Oh, that wasn't me, sorry. Thanks, Gio. Can you guys hear me okay? By the way, change tip. Nice shirt, I had to point that out. So 2013, started building a lot of mining rigs, and before I knew it, I was running to Home Depot and buying as many extension cords as I could carry, and I had extension cords running out throughout my house so I could reach every single circuit on my panel. At one point, I went to the addition of my house. I was pushing about 130 degrees in the addition of my house. I had all the windows open and fans blowing. My neighbors thought I had a grow operation. They didn't know what it was, but it looked illicit. But that was my introduction into Bitcoin. I saw a trend in mining throughout the years, and I saw that mining operations started becoming more and more centralized over time. And I started seeing that these mining operations, they'd raise money, and they'd throw thousands of these little toasters into warehouses all around the world, and it was one person making the decision. And so I started looking forward into the mining space to see what it was going to look like and how do we avoid centralization in the space to keep Bitcoin free and decentralized on a transactional level. And before I get into that a little bit, because I had to look, kind of envision pretty far into the future, I want to go into the past a little bit. Okay, so let's rewind about 100 years. March 31st, 1924. This airline company got started. Imperial Airways, you probably never heard of it. It got merged into British Airways many years later. But Imperial Airways was one of the original commercial airlines. And if we go back 100 years and you were boarding one of these airplanes, and I stopped you and I pulled you aside and I said, hey, let me tell you what airline travel is going to look like 100 years from now. And I started to explain to you what the TSA was. And I started to explain to you what customs was. I started explaining to you the difference between first class, business class, and coach, and then getting your bags lost. Now I explained to you that a lot of people in this world were actually going to be traveling all around the world just to meet up with each other and figure out that they actually live 10 minutes away from each other back home. But then they're going to see each other at conferences all around the world, and some of you actually live that reality. If I told you about the entire industry of airlines 100 years into the future back in 1924, you probably would have thought I was absolutely insane, because we just walked out into the middle of a field and we got on this tin box and we were going to be flying a couple miles, and your brain is not going to fathom what a full industry looks like when it matures. If I were to do the same thing with Bitcoin mining, and that's what I had to do, I had to what's 100 years going to look like with Bitcoin mining, and how do we keep it decentralized? And if we try to do that with AI, what's 100 years from now look like in AI, and we try to keep it censor resistant? tamper resistant, out of the control of any one government, entity, or organization. These are the problems that we're trying to figure out now. So we put in the pieces and they take root. So 100 years from now, when this ecosystem matures, we're not left with leaving a future to our kids and our kids' kids that is very dominated by any one controlling entity that can censor, can make history disappear with a click of a button. One more story for you. The story is about a guy named Brad. And this is really leading into Lumerin, and why did we develop Lumerin, and what were we envisioning Lumerin? And it's more of a fun story, because Brad had come up the ranks in this company called Exicor, and he was an options trader. And Brad did very well for himself. In fact, Exicor did very well for themselves, and they had a brand new warehouse space that they renovated into a beautiful office right on the river, overlooking the city skyline. The atrium, in fact, had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, and Brad took the perfect corner office across the warehouse. Brad was living a great life. Unfortunately, this week, Brad was having a little bit of difficulties. See, their Exicor had started implementing a new back-office software. And Brad got a call one day from his secretary in the lobby, and the secretary told him that, Brad, I think you need to come into the lobby. And Brad, in his haste, said, you know what? Just handle it. It's like, no, Brad, there's a delivery here. You need to come into the lobby. Brad's like, all right, whatever. So Brad storms across the warehouse into the lobby. He sees his secretary. He sees the floor-to-ceiling windows. He sees the river. He says, what? She says, well, there's someone here to see you. He looks across the lobby, and he sees a very oddly dressed man. And this is when Brad notices two things. One, the oddly dressed man, and two, just outside the Exicor beautiful lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows is a very large barge of coal. The man then stands up, walks over to Brad and says, you must be Brad. Brad says, yes, I am. How can I help you? Well, I've got a delivery for you. Wasn't it you that just ordered this 50 tons of coal? And that's when Brad realized that he made an incredible mistake. Because in the implementation of the new back office software, and when one of the analysts called him and told him about a mistake in one of the orders and wanted to confirm with Brad, Brad told him just to push it through. And what he did not realize was he was about to take delivery of his commodity that he had been actively trading for the previous couple months. Now, whether it's true or not, stories like this go to underscore a point. Okay? And there are a lot of legendary stories in the options trading world of the secretary that accidentally took delivery of several truckloads of pork loin, or the intern that accidentally, traded and took delivery of, several barges of coal or oil or whatnot. Now, they all underscore the point of the extreme disconnect between the product and the market. Okay? So there's actually a product trading hands, the ownership of that product, but there's a market behind the scenes. And I realized that this is a detachment or a decoupling. And that's when we started talking about Lumerin. How do we create a market like this for Lumerin? How do we create hash power as a commodity where we can actually decouple the control of hash power from the creation of hash power? Because it doesn't matter where in the world the coal is actually mined. You could actually own that coal and you can trade it back and forth in the form of a commodity on the market. And this is exactly what we built for Lumerin, where we could decouple the control of hash power from the creation of hash power. But the difference here is Bitcoin mining hash power is instantly deliverable, completely anonymous, and fulfilled anywhere in the world. So it's global. And what we came up with is a data routing pattern, and that is what Lumerin is. It is a data routing pattern that uses smart contracts to connect a data transmitter to a data receiver, and it all happens through smart contracts. So we spent the last few years developing this pattern and this product into a hash power marketplace where you could actively buy and sell hash power. Now, to show the model, I didn't know really good symbol for hash power, so I decided to use a dinosaur, because why not? It's my presentation. So what we have here is we have a seller that is posting contracts on the open marketplace that's completely decentralized, completely anonymous, and you have a buyer that is posting payment to the contract, and the seller streams the little dinosaurs directly to the buyer. So it's a peer-to-peer transfer of the commodity based on a smart contract route. So we expand this out a little bit further. So the seller is sending the hash power directly to the buyer. The buyer is actually sending the hash power to a pool. The pool is mining with the hash power, then paying the Bitcoin back to the buyer, which transmits the payment on chain. We expand this out a little bit further. Now you have a bunch of sellers actually supplying their hash power to a decentralized marketplace, and we effectively have a hash power grid where you can now take a local resource known as electricity, which is actually very confined to a local grid. You can translate your electricity into hash power, and now you can deploy your hash power onto a global grid. And now anyone anywhere in the world can bid on that hash power and start mining with it. So this is the vision of Lumerin. Okay, where we're not burning electricity to make coins, we're translating electricity into hash power and selling it on the open market. And that's been our focus for the last several years until I met David Johnston. And that's when he started explaining to me about what Morpheus was and explained to me this idea of smart agents. And the way I would explain it would be the idea of a really, really amazing robot spider that can crawl around between any ecosystem trying to accomplish the task that has been given. So you could tell this robot spider, here's $10,000. I want you to make me the highest yield possible over the next 7 days. And that robot spider is going to have to be able to traverse any network, any LLM, any resource it needs to in order to fulfill its mission. And then after 7 days, it's going to come back to you, give you back your resource, and say, this is my results. Now, it's a really cool vision. Another cool vision is if I pull up my phone and I say, I want to watch a feature-length film with Matthew McConaughey and Sarah Jessica Parker about pirates in the middle of Siberia. Well, I want my robot spider to go out and draft a script with a really high-powered text to LLM, give me back the script, then it's going to take that script and go to an audio generator that's going to build a soundtrack and audio tracks with the actors' voices. It's going to send me back that. And then it's going to go and render a high-res video of my feature-length film, and it's going to stream directly to my phone, and I get to watch my movie on the fly, whatever I want, individual content. Now, in order to do something like that, I can't have that all happen on my phone. That has to have an amazing amount of connected resources, and all those people have to be compensated along the way. And as I started seeing this vision more and more, I started realizing, wow, you need a really, really good routing system. And it turns out that we just happen to have built a really, really good routing system over the past 2 to 3 years for hash power. So we overlaid the Morpheus model with the Lumerin model and realized that we can essentially have a marketplace using smart contracts to broker the open and closing of TCP/IP sockets between users and providers to stream to stream AI compute. And this is what we've been building for the last 2.5 months. Now, I don't have dinosaurs here, so we're going to use something cooler. We're going to use Neo for the AI model. And basically, it's the same exact pattern. We're going to be posting payments in whatever form it's going to be, and the smart contract is going to handle the routing. Now, this was a very, very high level of what we're doing. There is a 23-page exhaustive architecture document on the actual protocol, if you'd like to dig into that. That's all inside the GitHub. One more story for you while I wrap up. And this story is about a guy named John. Okay. Now, John immigrated from Ireland to New England, and John was a printer. And once upon a time, John was given a very, very important document. Okay. John actually made 200 copies of this document. The document was not even signed yet. The drafter gave it to him and said, here, make copies and disperse this. John made 200 copies. John dispersed the document. John did a good job. Now, as of today, only 26 of those documents actually exist. And why do 26 of those documents actually exist is because that document was actually printed 200 times about 250 years ago. And if John did not make 200 copies of that document and disperse 200 copies of that document as given to him by John Hancock, then we would not have 26 verifiable, authentic proofs of the Declaration of Independence 250 years later. If we only had one copy of the Declaration of Independence and that copy got destroyed or changed or censored, we have no verifiable evidence. But because John Dunlap printed 200 copies of it, we now have 26 copies 250 years later to prove verifiably that the Declaration of Independence has not been tampered with. Now, let's go back to the airline story. 100 years from now, what's important to me and why am I doing this? What's important to me and why is David doing this and Christopher doing this and Scott and everyone else that's involved in Morpheus doing this? Is because 100 years from now, we want to be able to look at the information that human beings have and say, that's tampered, that has not been tampered with, that has not been censored. That event actually happened. Those people actually did that. There are people groups in this world that want to limit information. There are people groups in this world that want to censor information for whatever reason, for profit, for prestige, for power, for controlling another people group. For whatever reason, this happens. And it will continue to happen. It will continue to get worse. And when you give them the power of something like AI, it will continue to accelerate. Free AI is important, so that does not happen. And this is why we're building Morpheus. And this is why I'm so proud to be a part of this team and to be working on this with you guys. My name is Ryan Condron. I wrote the paper for Lumerin. You can find us at lumerin.io. You can follow me on Twitter for random comments that really mean nothing, but can be rather entertaining sometimes. But I'd love to answer any of your questions if you have any. Yes, George. Here, let me give you the mic. Sorry, guys. Let me give you the mic so you can ask the question.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so, yeah, I'm just trying to understand this, like, I guess sort of in the context. I know it's not the same, but, like, of staking providers, right? Because, like, they're providing for other people using their infrastructure to help someone else stake the token they have. So, for example, with Ethereum, there's a ton of, you know, bigger staking providers that are offering Ethereum staking for other people. You go there, you know, you do what you need to do, and you know they're doing the heavy lifting, and you're getting the reward. So, is it like an obvious first step for you to go to those kind of companies and say, hey, run the Lumerin protocol, and you know whatever excess compute you have on your machines globally, you'll be making money. I'm just wondering, like, how do you roll this out to, like, is that a target? Those people who are already kind of in that business of offering their infrastructure.
Yeah, so the key here is economic incentives. Is where are they going to get the most for their compute power? Where are holders of the More token going to get the most for staking it? The way I didn't really get into this, the Yellowstone paper lays out the actual compensation model for compute providers. You actually are able to use a certain amount of compute every day just for owning Morpheus token. Okay, so the way the model works, and actually we just launched last week the contracts on testnet for testing. But the way it works is you will stake your More token in order to access your compute tranche on a daily basis. So what we will see happening is you will see a centralized compute provider, or say a centralized service that will say, hey, stake your Morpheus token with us and we'll pay you for it, because they're going to probably take that compute and go use it for something. This is a model probably that Venice will adopt, that will say, hey, stake your Morpheus token with Venice, you get access to better image generation, better video generation, whatnot, and behind the scenes, Venice is using that AI compute tranche that's a daily drop from Morpheus. So we see it in the model, is built in there. Now, if you've been following IONET and some of these other systems, they've had issues with spoofing GPUs, they've had issues with spoofing nodes. We're actively thinking through all those patterns, and we're actually building a lot of these gamified scenarios. We're designing them in to be a feature and not a bug. Where, hey, yeah, you could spoof a compute provider and try to cannibalize your own compute. Sure. The most you're ever going to get is you're holding a Morpheus token. So you're going to be incentivized to keep increasing your balance of Morpheus token. So economically, it's better for the network, but they're going to eventually fall behind on cannibalizing their own compute anyways. So it's kind of diminishing returns. I don't know if that answered your question, but we are talking to a lot of big compute providers that are very, very interested in being an initial backer and provider for Morpheus. And it's really a decentralized effort because we have a lot of people talking to a bunch of different compute providers. And as David said earlier, once this is deployed, if a provider wants to provide compute and register themselves on contract, we can't stop them. That is their initiative. And if they want to provide compute, if they want to spoof compute, if they want to try to bring down the network, that's their initiative. It's my job to make sure we architect a system that can withstand that and can work around it and economically can outpace that. Any other questions?
So I'm familiar with the hash rate for Bitcoin in your Boomerang model, but I'm not too familiar about how this is working with the Morpheus protocol. Can you describe that further?
Yeah, so the Morpheus protocol is a complete fresh build. So it's using the Lumerin pattern, but it's not using any of the Lumerin hash power software. So all the hash power, marketplace, all of that, our devs have learned through blood, sweat, and tears a lot of lessons over the past 2 to 3 years, but we have rewritten it from the ground up using those lessons for the Morpheus node. So the Morpheus ecosystem, Lumerin ecosystem are two completely different ecosystems. But the Lumerin team is actively refactoring all the code.
Yeah, I think the missing piece is you're explaining people are hosting AI models, and that's the inference they're providing, and that's what they're missing.
Was that the question? I misheard it. So there's an on-chain registry for AI models. Any provider can download that AI model and run that AI model against their compute, and then offer that on the network. And that's the equivalent of a miner offering hash power using their device would be the equivalent of a provider using their compute to offer an AI model on the Morpheus network. Is that the answer? All right, got it. Any other questions that I may or may not answer correctly? No? Good.
Awesome.